October 16th, 1972. A Cessna 310 sits idling on a frozen runway in Anchorage. On board are two of the most powerful men in Washington, House Majority Leader Hale Boggs and Congressman Nick Begich. They're headed for Juneau on a routine campaign stop. But Alaska's different. It's 700,000 square miles of the most hostile terrain on Earth. It's twice the size of Texas, filled with jagged peaks and weather that turns deadly in seconds. When that plane took off, it didn't just crash, it vanished. No wreckage, no bodies, no trace. You've heard about the Bermuda Triangle, but few know about another responsible for even more disappearances. This is the story of the Alaskan Triangle.
Confirmed, loading complete. Closing ramp. Closing ramp.
The disappearance of Hale Boggs made headlines, but it wasn't the first time Alaska swallowed a large aircraft without trace. 22 years earlier, on January 26, 1950, the US military faced a loss so baffling, it remains one of the great aviation mysteries of the 20th century. It was called Operation Mike. Douglas C-54 Skymaster lifted off from Elmendorf Air Force Base, just outside of Anchorage. On board were 44 people, military personnel, civilian technicians, and among them, a pregnant woman and her infant son. The destination was Montana. The weather was clear. The aircraft was mechanically sound. The pilot, Lieutenant Kyle McMichael, was an experienced and very well-regarded pilot. 2 hours into flight, McMichael radioed his last report in. They were over snag just on the Canadian border. That transmission was the last time anyone heard from the aircraft. When the C-54 failed to arrive, the military launched a search effort that dwarfed even the later Boggs operation. More than 7,000 personnel were mobilized. Joint US-Canadian forces swept across mountains, forests, and frozen river systems. The search went on for weeks. Then the reports began to change. Some search pilots described seeing columns of smoke rising from remote forest areas. Signs that suggested survivors. But when the aircraft descended to investigate, the locations were pristine. No fire, no wreckage, no footprints. Radio operators at base camp claimed they intercepted faint garbled transmissions, ghost signals. These took place long after the C-54's batteries should have been exhausted. The signals were weak, fragmented, and impossible to triangulate. Official reports stopped short of confirming them. Unofficially, the story persisted. It was as if the aircraft was still out there, unable to be seen, but still trying to be heard. Eventually the search was called off. No wreckage was ever recovered, no bodies, no oil slick, and no debris field. 44 people vanished. The C-54 Skymaster became a ghost ship of the Alaskan wilderness, a steel aircraft erased so completely it left only questions behind. And once again, the disappearances, they sat quietly on the map, waiting to be connected. By the mid-1980s, Alaska's reputation as a place where aircraft simply disappeared was already well established. But in November 1986, something took place that changed the nature of the mystery. This time, the aircraft didn't vanish. It was watched. Captain Kenju Terachi was a veteran pilot for Japan Airlines, flying a Boeing 747 cargo aircraft over Alaska's interior en route to Anchorage. Cruising at altitude, Terachi noticed something odd. The lights of the city below, they seemed to disappear. Not gradually, instantly. Then his radar lit up. 3 objects appeared around the aircraft. 2 registered as a small rectangle return. The third, it was enormous, far larger than any conventional aircraft. Terachi later described it as larger than an aircraft carrier. However, it was silent, and it maneuvered without visible propulsion. It repositioned itself with deliberate precision around the 747. Terachi contacted air traffic control. Ground radar themselves confirmed what he was seeing. For nearly 30 minutes, the objects tracked alongside the cargo aircraft. The massive object paced the 747, adjusted altitude, then moved away, only to reappear moments later. Tarachi reported feeling as if the aircraft itself was being observed. Then, without warning, all 3 objects vanished. The next day, the FAA opened an investigation. At an official briefing, the division chief of the FAA's Accident Investigation Branch confirmed the radar data. He confirmed the pilot's account. Then, months later, the story changed. The official explanation had shifted. The radar returns were now being reclassified as ghost images. The encounter was quietly downgraded, and Captain Tarachi was removed from flight duty. Tarachi later said the most disturbing part was not what he saw in the sky. It was how quickly the system worked to make the facts disappear. What mattered wasn't just the objects, it was where the encounter occurred. The flight path ran directly through the same region where aircraft had already been vanishing for decades. The Alaskan Triangle wasn't just a place where planes were lost, it was a place where something else appeared to be watching back. By the late 1980s, something uncomfortable was becoming hard to ignore. People weren't just going missing in Alaska. They were vanishing and not coming back. Thousands of missing person reports have been filed across the state over the decades. Many are never resolved. What stands out isn't the danger, it is the absence. Search teams describe the same pattern again and again. Groups separate briefly, and someone is gone. Tracks lead into open terrain, and then suddenly stop. No remains, no explanation. Skeptics often dismiss Alaska Triangle sightings as hallucinations, weather balloons or exaggeration. But deep inside the triangle, near the small town of Gokona, sits a facility that has fueled suspicion for decades. Its official name is the High-Frequency Active Auroral Research Program, a field of metal towers rising from the spruce forest, arranged in a precise, geometric grid. Hundreds of antennas, cables, control buildings, and according to the official explanation, HAARP was built to study the ionosphere, the charged layer of the upper atmosphere that reflects radio signals and affects long-range communications. But the scale of their system seems to tell a more complicated story. HAARP is, at its core, a powerful radio transmitter. When active, it can direct millions of watts of high-frequency energy into a focus point in the sky, temporarily heating and disturbing the ionosphere. This creates controlled regions of charged particles, artificial plasma, allowing researchers to observe how energy moves through the atmosphere. The controversy comes from what else that kind of energy manipulation can theoretically do. Over the years, critics have claimed HAARP can influence weather systems, interfere with navigation, or disrupt communications altogether. Some go further, suggesting biological or neurological effects. These claims, they remain unproven. But inside the context of the Alaska Triangle, a more unsettling question emerges. If a natural anomaly exists beneath this region, a fault in the Earth's energy system, then a facility like HAARP wouldn't need to create anything new. It would only need to interact with what's already there. Pilots flying near Gokona have reported instrument fluctuations. Hikers describe a low-frequency hum that seems to vibrate through the chest rather than through the air. A sound with no clear direction or source. Is this the electronic fog Sanderson warned about, or is it the side effect of a human technology operating inside a naturally unstable zone? We don't know, but militaries don't build facilities like HAARP by accident, and they don't place them randomly. Long before anybody drew lines on maps or talked about vortices, the people who lived on this land were already warning outsiders. For thousands of years, indigenous communities along Alaska's southern coast passed down stories about places you don't follow sounds into. They don't call it a triangle, and they do not blame aircraft malfunctions. They speak of the Kushtaka. Loosely translated, the name means land otter man, but the stories described are something far more disturbing than an animal. The Kushtaka is said to be a shapeshifter, able to imitate human voices.
Please help me.
Most often the cry of a woman or a child in distress. The goal is quite simple. Lure the people away from safety. Those who follow the sound are never seen again. To outsiders it sounds like folklore, a cautionary tale meant to keep children close to campfires. But in the 1940s, those stories took a darker meaning in a real place. Portlock was a thriving cannery settlement on the Canal Peninsula. It had homes, a post office, a school, and families who made their living from the sea and the forest. Then people began disappearing. Loggers went into the woods and never returned. Hunters vanished along familiar trails, and eventually bodies began washing up near the lagoon. They weren't simply dead. They were torn apart. Witnesses describe a large, upright creature moving along the tree line. Massive, hairy, aggressive. Locals called it Nantinya, a being distinct from the Kushtaka, but just as feared. This wasn't a shy animal avoiding people. It was something that stalked them. One of the most chilling accounts came from the town's postmaster. While checking his traps, he encountered the creature face to face. He later described it as a hairy devil walking on two legs, screaming with a sound that didn't resemble any animal he knew. He ran for his life, and when he returned to the town, the elders gathered and they made a decision. No job was worth this. No fish, no lumber, no land. Within a single month, the entire population of Portlock packed their belongings and fled by boat. Homes were left furnished. Tools were abandoned. The town was never resettled. Today, Portlock, also known as Port Chatham, sits rotting on the shoreline. Locals in nearby villages will still warn visitors. Do not go there. Whatever drove the town away never left. Not everyone who encounters the triangle vanishes. Some return. A local hunter, and we'll call him Jim, was tracking a moose near the glacial regions of Portlock. He was experienced and well equipped. Carrying a high-caliber rifle and a satellite phone, Jim followed the tracks for hours before stopping to rest. That's when the sound began. A child crying, but wrong. The pitch was off, metallic and hollow, as if the sound itself didn't quite belong in the air. Then came the feeling, the unmistakable sense of being watched. Jim turned towards the tree line and saw movement. It wasn't an otter. It wasn't a bear. It was something that was tall and upright. Its outline shimmered, shifting in and out of focus like heat rising from asphalt. When Jim raised his rifle, the crying stopped instantly. And that's when the silence hit. Survivors of close encounters in the triangle describe the same moment again and again. It isn't just quiet, it's a vacuum. The birds stop, the wind drops, the insects, they go silent. It feels as if the world itself has paused. Researchers sometimes refer to this phenomenon as the Oz factor, reported during extreme or anomalous encounters. Psychologist suggests it's a survival response, the brain filtering out the background noise to focus in on the threat. But those who experience it insist the silence isn't internal. Inside that silence, perception warps, distance collapses, direction dissolves, compasses, they spin. Jim didn't want to find out what he was facing. He didn't just back away, he did it at speed. Search and rescue teams later described scenes that echo the same pattern in cases that didn't end up so cleanly. Campsites left intact, food still warm, equipment still neatly arranged, and footprints that lead into the open, and then simply stop, as if they were removed. As researchers compared decades of disappearances, there was one name that kept resurfacing: Ivan T. Sanderson. Sanderson wasn't interested in single stories. He was looking for patterns. When he plotted aircraft losses, ships vanishing, and unexplained events on a global map, he found that they weren't evenly distributed. 12 regions, in fact, stood out. Clusters where navigation failed, instruments behaved erratically, and people disappeared at disproportionate rates. Sanderson called them the vile vortices. The most famous is in the Bermuda Triangle. The other sits directly over Alaska. Sanderson theorized that these regions coincided with extreme electromagnetic instability, places where Earth's energy systems behave unpredictably, not just spinning compasses, but electronic fog, instrument failure, and in rare cases, distorted perception of time. A cargo pilot was flying a routine run near Mount McKinley under clear skies. Visibility was unlimited. The aircraft itself was operating normally, and without warning, the sky ahead lost depth. It didn't cloud over, it flattened. The air turned into an uncomfortable grey, as if the horizon had been erased. Bill checked his instruments. The altimeter began to unwind. The artificial horizon, it rolled. The radio dissolved into static. He had no visual reference points, no sun, no ground, no mountains. But then came the vibration. It wasn't engine noise. It was a low-frequency hum he felt in his jaw and his teeth. Bill later said it felt as if the aircraft itself was moving through something rather than air. After what he estimated to be 3 or 4 minutes, the grey lifted. The instruments stabilized. But absolutely nothing lined up. He was miles off course, and according to the fuel gauge, he had burned nearly an hour's worth of fuel in a fraction of the time. Bill landed at the nearest airstrip he could, shut down the aircraft, and a mechanic came to examine the plane. He studied the gauges and said, "You weren't flying where you thought you were." Sanderson believed the vile vortices were nodes, intersections in a planetary energy grid. Some physicists speculate that under extreme conditions, these electromagnetic stresses could distort local space and time. If that stress crosses a threshold, the result wouldn't be a crash. It wouldn't be displacement. An aircraft entering such a zone might not fall out of the sky. It might exit in another place. Or another time. During the Cold War, the United States quietly explored an idea that sounded impossible. What if the human mind itself could be used as an intelligence-gathering tool? For nearly 2 decades, the CIA and US Army ran a classified program together, known as Project Stargate. Its focus was remote viewing, the alleged ability to project consciousness to a distant location and describe what was going on there. Most participants produced inconsistent results. One person did not. His name was Pat Price. Price quickly gained a reputation inside the intelligence community for producing information that could later be corroborated, and in one case, he reportedly described details inside a Soviet facility, right down to the signage and room layout, before satellite confirmation. By the early 1980s, Price was assigned a new target: Alaska, specifically Mount Hayes, a remote peak located deep within the Alaskan Triangle. What Price described unsettled his handlers. He didn't see snow. He didn't see rock. He saw inside the mountain. According to latest summaries of declassified material, Price described a vast underground complex. Now, this was not an American base, not a Soviet installation. It was something else. He claimed the facility was occupied by humanoid entities, human-like in form, but subtly wrong. Their movements were unnaturally fluid. Their presence, it was deliberate. Price identified Mount Hayes as one of several global relay sites, locations he believed formed part of a planetary monitoring system. In his account, the entities were not visitors. They were caretakers, monitoring Earth's geological and energetic stability. Years later, another remote viewer was tasked with the same target under a related intelligence program. Independently, he described exactly the same underground structure, the same layout, the same presence, but he added something new. He claimed activity in the mountain appeared to correlate with aerial phenomena and anomalies in the region. Investigative journalist Linda Moulton Howe later documented testimony from individuals who claimed knowledge of similar underground installations. Their descriptions echoed the same elements: elevators descending hundreds of feet, long corridors branching into laboratories, personnel areas, a central chamber dominated by a massive, sloped black surface, and always the sense that the facility wasn't merely observing the triangle. It was using it. Alaska remains one of the most active regions in the world for unexplained aerial sightings. Thousands of reports span decades from civilians, commercial pilots, and military crews. If Mount Hayes exists in the way that these accounts suggest, then the Alaskan Triangle isn't just a dangerous region. It's a hub, a place where traffic comes and goes. And not all of it belongs to us. When stories of the Alaskan Triangle reach the mainstream, they're usually dismissed as folklore, exaggeration, or coincidence. To be fair, Alaska doesn't need anything supernatural to be deadly. The land alone is unforgiving. Glacier shifts without warning. Weather systems form in minutes. Temperatures, they kill faster than any injuries. The predators, they roam freely. Twist an ankle here and there's no help coming. Near the magnetic North Pole, navigation becomes unreliable. Compasses, they behave erratically. Whiteout conditions erase the horizon. It leaves pilots unable to tell the sky from the ground. Many aircraft accidents can be explained this way: spatial disorientation, controlled flight into terrain, human error magnified by extreme condition. And legends like the Kushtaka? Fear does strange things to the mind. A shadow becomes a figure. The wind becomes a voice. Panic, it fills the gaps. Skepticism, it's not just reasonable. It's a necessity. But then there are the cases that refuse to sit neatly inside those explanations. Congressional aircraft vanishing in clear weather without wreckage. Military transport with 44 people aboard erased without debris. A town abandoned because of something in the woods stalking its people. Hikers who disappear within minutes, leaving behind footprints that simply stop in the snow. You don't need to believe in portals to admit something behaves differently here. You don't need to accept alien caretakers to notice that the patterns repeat where they shouldn't. No one knows if the Alaskan Triangle is a gateway. No one knows if it's an ancient mechanism, a natural fault in the planet, or a convergence of forces that we don't yet understand. But whatever is happening in the region certainly doesn't care about what we believe. Thanks for joining me in the bunker today, and remember, they rely on you forgetting, on you clicking away. Don't do it. Go deeper down the rabbit hole with this next video. And to make sure the signal can find you again, join the network, click subscribe, here, and keep the light alive. This is Thinkavarium.